Welcome back. We're discussing soldiers who refuse to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. Is it an honourable objection or a dishonourable desertion? Joining me from Houston is Dahar Jamil, an independent journalist who was one of the few unembedded reporters to cover the war in Iraq. He's just written a new book, The Will to Resist: Soldiers Who Refuse to Fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. Here in Washington, D.C. is Philip Riley, Director of National Security and Foreign Relations for the American Legion. He joins me. He's also a highly decorated U.S. Army colonel who retired after 27 years of commissioned service. Now, we have the results from our informal chat room poll where we asked the question, are soldiers who refuse to fight dishonourable deserters or honourable objectors? That chat room poll said 82% of you voting honourable objectors and 18% of you saying dishonourable deserters. Of course, it's unscientific as a survey, but it does give us an idea of what the viewers in the chat room are thinking. Let me get back to some questions here and get in Colonel Riley here. So you were talking about at the beginning that you've made an oath as a warrior. At what point or what do you feel allows anyone to justify questioning an order? Is there any circumstance you can see?
Well, we have a national security decision-making process. I trust in that process because I think when you have a balance of power, democracy as we have, there is rationale that's put into it. It's carefully considered, and when a clear and present danger to our national vital interests are there, then we act. And I trust in that judgment.
Well, Dahar, one thing I wanted to put to you was you've chosen to focus on this issue of the will to resist, as the book is entitled. It still is a very small percentage of the military force that does actually take this choice. Why focus on this specifically right now?
Well, because for starters, it's happening. We're looking at a military that really is in a bit of a state of collapse right now, looking at the fact that we've had 2 million people so far in the U.S. military cycled through both the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan. And of those coming back home, well over 300,000 have severe depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. We're having so far, for example, 43,000 soldiers have been sent back to Iraq to serve, already diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder or other types of problems, of combat-related injuries. So we're looking at this kind of spiraling up, and soldiers, meanwhile, back home that have even already been discharged are not getting care from the VA, et cetera. So we're starting to see a growing problem of dissent in the military, and people are starting to question both these occupations. There is no end in sight. Most of the soldiers I interviewed for the book said, look, there's no clear objective there. Even among soldiers who are in support of the occupation or those who are against it, one thing that everybody's agreeing on, those on the ground, is that there's really no clear objective. They're asking themselves, why are we here? How much longer is this going on? And what they're seeing over there, especially in Iraq, for example, this is starting to happen more in Afghanistan, is that the people there don't want them there. The people of those countries don't feel that they're there to liberate them. They're actually there being perceived as the enemy, and the U.S. military is being perceived as the terrorists. So naturally, the soldiers are starting to kind of scratch their heads and starting to do things like look at international law in the UN Charter, and more specifically the exact duty according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice and what is a lawful order. So what do you do when you find yourself in the middle of a brutal occupation that seems to be getting worse by the day, particularly in Afghanistan right now, and then you're looking at international law and the reasons, the reasons why you were told to deploy, and you're asking yourself, is this really a lawful order? And is this actually violating the Uniform Code of Military Justice? And when you look at international law, there isn't any subjectivity or personal opinion about this. This is clearly an occupation that it's in violation of international law, and therefore by the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, it's in violation of domestic law as well.
Okay, before we get a caller, Colonel, your response, sir.
Well, I found that is a very interesting interpretation of events. I think the people who clearly are terrorized in Afghanistan are the 80% of the population that is subjected to a much smaller minority that's imposing brutal power on their citizens and holding them hostage and holding the progress of their government towards being responsive, towards providing the security that is needed. And I just find it very hard to go along with the argument I just heard in terms of what our troops are saying about it. But they're doing a fantastic job, and we should be clearly honoring them.
On the issue of selecting where combat should take place, though, we have Iraq and Afghanistan here. There are those who criticize the U.S. for perhaps not, intervening more decisively in, say, Somalia and other locations. Can the U.S. be that selective and then still be considered objective?
Well, I think one thing you have to realize is we can't do it all. And we're clearly, our way of life is clearly threatened by extremists. No doubt about that, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people share that opinion, particularly from Western cultural society. It's not that we're against Islam. It's an extremist movement fed by many different complex factors. But there is a clear and present danger that we need to contend against. And I give terrific credit to the volunteer army that we have and to our allies that have participated in this. And I think the consequences of us not finishing this correctly are extremely dangerous.
Well, let's get in a call here from North Carolina. Mario, thanks for your patience. What would you like to add to the debate?
I just wanted to make a quick comment with regards to, I guess, the whole thing, and maybe a question. I know that I have my cousin, well, actually my brother-in-law. He is from the Marines, and one thing that we were talking about yesterday is that he was telling me that he didn't really want, he didn't believe in what was going on as far as the battles and the wars that are going on outside. And one of the things that we were talking about is that he felt that if he actually if he got sent to any of these places where he had to encounter any battle, that he wouldn't be able to do what he was asked to do. That in fact, he's going to be put in a situation where he's not going to give his all.
Right.
And I guess my question is, how does this person, the one you're talking to, how does he feel about sending people who do not believe in this sort of battles, in this sort of wars? It seems to me that it's a waste of life, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of efforts.
Mario, I'm going to get that to the Colonel in just a second. Let's get Shaukat on the line from the UK while he's been standing by. Shaukat, your question or comment, please.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to ask the guest in the studio with you, Riz, if a Taliban took a moral objection to the Taliban movement, or in Africa, a soldier took an objection against the dictator in Africa on a moral value, were they any different from any British or American NATO soldiers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Colonel, two questions there. One, the issue of how would you regard someone deserting in the case of the Taliban, for example, or in one of the African countries where conflict's taking place? And then also, how do you handle where there is dissent? I mean, if it is a growing dissent, and we hear a lot about it, but if there are soldiers, how do you, as you're trying to keep a military together, justify to those you're sending out to battle that they have to do their duty when they lose the sight of it more and more?
Okay, well, the first question is, we have due process for someone who does object. The recent cases, they've received some sentences, yes, but they missed a movement with a unit. And so the legal process was given to them, and they had their chance in court, and they're paying a price practically about the same as the unit in terms of the unit's deployment. So we're a nation of laws, and even in the military, those laws are followed. With respect to the Taliban, if you desert from the Taliban, at least just last night, even in the program on CNN, the consequences of your wanting to quit and desert probably is going to lead to your immediate demise, one way or another. That to me is the difference, one of the big differences in terms of values.
How they handle it, yeah. Well, let's get Dahar Jamil in and just ask her, in terms of doing the research for your book, Will to Resist, how did you find that the people you spoke to accepted the potential consequences they would have to face, that if they were willing to make this decision, that they would have to actually face sometimes some fairly serious consequences?
Well, they were well aware that they would be facing severe consequences. I mean, for sure they're going to be court-martialed, given a trial in a court-martial, a military court, which is, for all intents and purposes, a kangaroo court. Well over 90% of them result in conviction. It's a military judge, it's an all-military jury, and it's certainly not a jury of their peers. For example, the one I sat in this past Friday up at Fort Hood, we're looking at the court-martial of a Sergeant Travis Bishop in front of a jury full of lieutenants and colonels, mostly lifers in the military. So not exactly his peers, and they basically behaved as such during the trial. So most of these people are aware they're going to do anywhere from 1 month to a year to sometimes more than that in jail. They're going to receive a severe lowering in rank. For example, with Bishop, he went from a sergeant to a private. Loss of sometimes 2/3 of forfeiture of their a big percentage of their pay while they're in jail, and this kind of thing, and then certainly a strict judgment from their peers. But they know this going in, and they feel that the price is worth it anyway, because, for example, as Victor Augusto said, look, this is worth it as opposed to going over to Afghanistan and participating in an illegal war.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining part in this debate, and thank you for taking part with your questions. On the next show, as Egypt's President Mubarak visits the White House, we examine how U.S. relations have changed between America and the largest Arab nation since the election of Barack Obama. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.